Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Bloom Impact Investing webinar. My name is Camille, and I am the founder of Bloom Impact Investing. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge the First Nations people as the traditional owners of the land on which this meeting is taking place today, which for me is Meanjin in Brisbane. I recognize the country north and south of the Brisbane River as the home of both the Turrbal and the Gira nations. And I pay deep respects to the elders, past, present, and future. Thank you so much for joining and welcome again. It's a pleasure to see you all. For the new people in the audience today, let me introduce Bloom and the purpose of our community events. At Bloom, we want to empower people to invest, to do well, and fight climate change at the same time. And we are on a mission to make climate impact investing easy and accessible. And part of this mission is to offer educational sessions like this webinar today to propel the voices of impact investing and sustainable finance experts like Mitchell far and wide. The aim of our webinar is to build a community of impact investors and people using their money for good, to build a greener, more circular and inclusive economy. And at Bloom, we think sustainable investing should be accessible to everyone. So we hope this webinar today is going to help you on your journey to use your money power for good. Quick housekeeping, please note this event is being recorded. We will send the event to all the attendees after the event via an email. Now, a quick note from our lawyers. Please be aware that the information provided in this webinar will be general in nature and does not constitute personal financial advice. So before acting on any information that we will present to you today, please make sure you consider how appropriate it is in regard to your objectives, financial situation and needs. Finally, please note this is a safe space. You can ask any question throughout the event by typing in the chat, and you can ask our speakers at the end of the event any question you have. We will keep 15 to 20 minutes at the end for Q&As. Now, allow me to introduce this webinar topic and our speaker. Today, we are touching on a hugely trendy and hot topic with Mitchell today, which is whether or not blockchain technology and crypto finance can deliver positive climate impact. So, as you all know, Bitcoin and blockchain technologies use a lot of energy, and it has been a bit of a burden for the crypto world to, I guess, to explain and to get people on the journey of linking blockchain and impact. But is all this information about energy efficiency or lack thereof accurate today, and how are people using cryptocurrency today in positive ways? So investing opportunities like NFTs continue skyrocketing in success and development. But for anyone climate conscious, is this an opportunity or a challenge? I myself have lots of questions and lot to learn in this space. So in the next hour, I'm really excited to talk to Mitchell about what is blockchain, what is crypto. We'll start from the basics, but also we'll go a step further and we'll really deep dive into the climate impact of these technologies. And we'll go all the way to how can we set a price on carbon and natural capital, and how can we use decentralized finance to go from an extracting financial system to a regenerative financial system. So Mitchell, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Camille. I'd also just like to acknowledge the Bundjalung Nation, whose lands I'm present on today, and the elders past, present, and emerging also.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. So I'm going to quickly introduce you. Mitchell, you are the co-founder of Katalyst.Earth. You started your venture this year, and you are using your experience to capitalize on blockchains through NFTs and carbon markets to work towards climate action. You have 15 years experience in global energy trading, renewables, investment and infrastructure across the UK, Switzerland, Singapore, and Australia. And you also have extensive knowledge of how to use these technologies to work towards a net zero future. So I'm really excited to talk to you today, Mitchell. Welcome again. Let's start with the basic. Can we unpack together the blockchain technology and crypto?
Yeah, absolutely.
What is it? How does it work?
I think that's a really good place to start, because I think people use these two terms interchangeably. So there is a big difference between crypto and blockchain that I think is important to differentiate to start with, and the reasons people may use this technology. So I think, people have their own views, but it's a technology. It's not inherently bad. You may read a lot of press about what's happening with the latest fad in this space, whether it's NFTs or scams or Ponzi's or whatever people are. There are those concerns from people in that space as well. I haven't been subject to anything in that area. I've actually met some really amazingly talented people in this space that have brought their expertise and skills to bear and are trying to use this technology in a number of different ways. So the real big difference between, say, blockchain and crypto, I think, is the important place to start. Blockchain is simply just a digital ledger, and we use them all the time, whether it's for accounting or other purposes, anything where you need to record a transaction in and out. And for someone like myself, who's actually used digital ledgers for tracking sustainability in the past, in my opinion, the blockchain is a really great development to help increase transparency and functionality in those sort of environments. And I can dive into sort of my experience with that a little bit more if you like. But crypto, on the other hand, is a token base, but it sits on that blockchain and has a store of value. And there's a number of different blockchains. You've mentioned Bitcoin, for example, is a good one. We can dive into a little bit more around why Bitcoin is unique versus some other blockchains or cryptocurrencies. But each blockchain, and there are a number of them, are built differently. Like many technologies, serve different functions and purposes. And you've seen this explosion that's creating a lot of innovation in the space. Each of those will generally have a cryptocurrency aligned with it. And that's simply a store of value that you can transact on that blockchain. So I hope that helps as a start.
It does. It gives a good base. And before we dive into technical topics, can we go back to your own journey? Because I think it's a very interesting journey, right? From, I guess, traditional finance to going into blockchain and creating your own business. Can you tell us more about that journey and where you started and what drew you to these new technologies?
Yeah, sure. I started my journey actually sort of at this epicenter of energy markets. So physical and paper, so financial trading of energy products. I helped set up the desk at one of the largest commodity traders. This is a company that turns over a couple of $100 billion a year. We set up the biodiesel trading desk. This is back in clean tech 1.0 in the 2000s, when electrification as it is now wasn't really the great thing that's being offered today. And biodiesel was a way for us to create a more environmentally friendly molecule of fuel, to drive your cars, your tractors, etc. We actually set up waste feedstock chains. So we used to buy in large quantities. I mean, our desk turned over maybe $1 billion a year. We would go and buy things like used cooking oil, which at the time was a very mafia business. But it started professionalizing, and companies such as ours were able to find counterparties that were actually aggregating this fuel, and we would go and refine it and then trade around that and sell that to end customers. But one big problem there, and I'm going to bring it back to blockchain, was being able to prove the origin, the provenance and sustainability of that fuel. Was it what it said it really was? And the market, when we started, hadn't really developed a mechanism that could prove that. So we actually, and I led what was called the European Union's renewables energy directive, long-winded topic, but sustainability advisory group. And that was a bit of a side gig, because we need to set it up to actually be able to really prove to our own customers that what they were buying was what we said it was. And this is a time when that market was growing quite quickly, and the mechanisms to safeguard it weren't really keeping up. So we worked with the German government's energy department called the BLE, and set up what was called the Navisi system. This was a digital ledger, and it tracked in and out. And we were doing everything on this Excel spreadsheet, and the market said it's not going to work, right? So we had to set up this digital ledger, and that proved, from the point of origin, people had to upload where they were taking, wherever the provenance of that fuel was, and you're working with very large companies in this space, people that are growing crops, etc., rapeseed, canola, to show where it came from. So it went into this digital ledger. It bounced around the market, 5 times, 10 times, until it actually ended up with a customer. But you could track the origin of that all the way through. It was extremely clunky. We had to double track everything to make sure it was going in the right place. But it really helped the market, because after a couple of years, there was one fraudulent actor who was left with a $250 million hole, because they'd been fraudulently claiming this origin. So it showed a real need for something like a digital ledger, and it helped weed out those bad actors as well.
So essentially, you traded energy and experienced firsthand the issues of traceability, which led you to, I guess, I'm sure, falling in love with blockchain, because all of a sudden you have a way to trace this origin issue.
It is a really powerful tool. I mean, that was, we're talking 12 years ago now, so it was pre-blockchain. So I've followed that for quite some time just to see the applications. But then I was busy doing other things. So I set up a global renewables company. We did commercial industrial power projects, particularly in energy access poor countries, so Africa, Central America, Asia Pacific, places like Papua New Guinea. And we were building solar and battery projects in those spaces. So, and that brings me back to where I found Bitcoin. So coming at the intersection of that, yes, traceability was a real key thing that I've kept in the back of my mind, and where blockchain can be useful. And that's really been where we're building Katalyst today. So we see the same issues in the carbon market. You need a digital ledger. You need to be able to prove that what your end buyer is buying is truly what it is, to avoid those issues around double counting, etc. And that's a problem that we're trying to solve. But we're particularly focused on how we can help scale this market. We need it to grow exponentially at this point to actually have a chance to try and achieve our net zero goals by 2050.
Okay. Thank you. That's helpful context. So now we understand a bit more what's blockchain, what's crypto. We understand where you're coming from, your past experience. Now let's dive a bit deeper into some of the other applications like NFTs and another acronym that is thrown around, so refi. So can you tell us a bit more about what these are, and maybe you can unpack how Katalyst.Earth, so your company, think about that, and how does this relate to climate?
Sure. So I'll start with what an NFT is. So this is a non-fungible token. So we talked about cryptocurrencies as being a token, a store of value. That's a fungible token. One and all, they're all the same, basically. You can convert one for the other. A non-fungible token is something that's completely unique. Okay, it's individual, and it can't be replicated, and it's easily identifiable. So you can't take this NFT and swap it directly for that one. They'll have different stores of value, for example, or what people often refer to utility as well. So why are these things interesting? Well, I think it's all quite new as well. But one way that we've been seeing people using NFTs is particularly in this art-based element that NFTs become famous for. There's a lot more to technology that they can do, which we can dive into. But we've seen some really interesting projects where instead of just going and creating what people see as a JPEG of a monkey and then selling it, people are using that technology to go and raise capital for environmental projects. So there's a number of these different NFTs projects that are happening. We've got one ourselves, actually. And the idea here was to A, learn the technology, and B, be able to actually make a difference and direct funds towards what we're focused on, which is regenerative projects. So things like planting trees.
So essentially, it's a new way to fundraise at the end of the day. It's
kind of like crowdfunding with a bit of art attached, but you can also embed what I was mentioning around utility before as well. So I think that people are still experimenting in this space, and it's very new, but that's been the first I think real life use case that we're seeing that is quite interesting from our perspective.
So essentially, NFT as a mechanism to sell a project, which at the end of the day, the outcome is owning a digital asset. And you can prove, if you buy it, that it's absolutely unique and it's yours. And there's a digital record to prove it, right? At the end of the day, it's what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's correct. And I just want to take that one step further. Where it's really unique is where you can apply it to other things that are non-fungible. So think about land, right? What you're seeing now is people are essentially taking something that's unique, i.e. a specific piece of land that requires regeneration. You can put that on the blockchain and it starts storing all the data because you've got a smart contract attached with that. And this is really where we're sort of experimenting at the moment. You can actually put that data on there. Okay, so at the moment, I see.
Now this gets interesting because we're talking about the real world, the real natural world that needs care and attention. And this is, I think, really different to what people think when they think NFT, myself included. We're far away from the monkey JPEG.
Totally. And we experimented with that so we could learn the technology and see how it could be applied, because we thought through that, I wonder if this can work. And so we've done some pilot projects, replanting trees. And essentially what we are doing is taking that project as an NFT, because it's non-fungible, okay? And then you can fractionalize it, you break it up into certain different parts. We're doing it per tree. And then what you can do is you can actually start using what you find to, like what you need to actually verify something is you need measurements, like you need data, right? And that data can be stored on the blockchain and it comes in through the NFT essentially. So how many trees did you plant? What species are they? Potentially how much carbon are they sequestering? How are they improving biodiversity? And the reason this is really interesting and where we're hoping to get to is that you can start automating processes. So you use remote or digital measurement reporting verification tools that can speak to this smart contract, okay? That's updating information in real time. At the moment, you need to go and send an auditor who costs $30,000 to go and write on an A4 piece of paper, tick some boxes, send it off to some guy. He comes back 6 months later and says, oh, you've made a mistake here. Can you please go and re-audit it or whatever? It's really cumbersome, laborious, manual process at the moment. And that's something that we're trying to fix by using this technology.
I understand. So all of a sudden, we're talking about a technology that could essentially unlock finance in natural capital assets. I mean, if I put my sustainable finance brain onto this topic here, that's really exciting. Now,
I just want to add on that. Sorry, Camille, you're 100% right. And I think the world will go that way. We're super early. Like we may be too early, right? But I can 100% see a world where that happens. But the really interesting piece is around how can you embed that in everyday life and everyone's everyday transactions, for example? Like,
yeah, you have to create a market,
turn,
right? That's the problem.
yeah, because suddenly you've got all this data and you're creating incentive mechanisms where people can actually invest in these projects. Like, you're starting to really value natural capital if you're able to do that. And where that becomes really interesting is that today, if you want to go and build, say, a carbon project, it basically needs to be huge. Like, most project developers won't look at a reforestation project for carbon below 2,000 or 5,000 hectares. I mean, that's like a small country, you know? We want to get that down to 100 hectares. You know, there's 100,000 small Australian farms, less than 100 hectares, okay? And we want those people to be able to be incentivized and access these sort of markets so that other people, like in voluntary carbon markets, can basically encourage them to go and do what is good for climate, good for the environment, good for their farm or their land or whatever they are. They may be land stewards, they don't have to be farmers. And really try and incentivize them to take care of that land and create.
So if I understand correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, all of a sudden we're now talking about a farmer who could, without going through big institutions, put their land onto blockchain and sell NFTs that would be pieces of their land, which everyday people like myself could buy to make sure that this piece of land is restored, or that there's a tree planted on it or whatever, and that we sequester carbon. So I could, yeah, all of a sudden we're allowing farmers or anyone owning land to, I guess, drive conservation outcomes.
We're looking at changing methods and practices towards regenerative farming, just using farming as an example. Yes, that is the dream. It's just whether you can create an incentive mechanism for a retail, you know, let's call them a collector at the moment because we don't have an AFSL. But yes, potentially future you know, a corporate that might be interested in having some sort of offset for a difficult to decarbonize process that they're involved in. Our difficulty at the moment is how do you encourage individuals to really look at it that way? I think you need a bit of a push and a pull.
There's a lot of education, I imagine.
Yeah, so that's really where we're getting at. But just to be clear, like, we don't talk to a farmer about blockchain or NFTs or anything because they run a mile, right? All we want to show them is someone will pay you to do this. Doesn't matter how it happens. It's just they will pay you to do that, and we can measure it, we can report it, and we can verify it, so that there's no question around, you know, is this project additional? Is it really doing what it says it's?
I understand. Now, Mitchell, I have to ask and be a bit controversial here, just for sake of, you know, being comprehensive and nuanced in the content we share with our audience. There's a lot of criticism around the fact that, you know, the blockchain technologies are quite energy intensive, and I understand you're proposing a whole new way to leverage these technologies for good, but aren't we limited by the inherent energy consumption of those technologies? I mean, you have to mine to use the blockchain, and this has an associated cost. So what do you reply to those critics?
Yep. So as with everything, it's quite nuanced, but no, it's not evil. And I'll dive into that a little bit more and why it's not. But it is a true criticism. Some blockchains do consume a huge amount of energy. So
which ones?
Bitcoin.
Throw some names.
Yeah,
okay.
Bitcoin.
Bitcoin, energy intensive.
Let's dive into reasons why, and let's dive into why it's not a bad thing. So I think the first thing to unpack is the difference between what's called proof of work and proof of stake. Bitcoin is a proof of work blockchain. That basically means you need all these different, what they call miners, to go and solve complex equations that consume a huge amount of energy. Okay. You'll get references, oh, Bitcoin consumes, you know, the same amount of energy as Argentina every year. Okay. And there's no denying it. So do data centers. When you're going to go watch Netflix, you're consuming energy. Okay. energy consumption itself is not inherently bad. I've worked in energy poor countries trying to give people more access to energy. So we can't demonize the use of energy first and foremost. Whether you agree with whether people should be using blockchain to non-print JPEGs, I mean, it's not an inherently bad thing. The use of energy, access to energy is linked, that's strongly correlated with quality of life. Okay, so how can something that consumes a lot of energy help increase access to energy? Okay, you're now getting to the conversation around, and I come from this renewables background, so tell me if I'm talking all jargon here, but renewables are, and I love this quote, prisoners of time and geography, i.e. they're intermittent. Basically, they produce a lot of energy in the middle of the day and none at night if you're talking about solar, or when it's windy. They produce too much at certain times, not enough at other times. So you can use things like energy storage, battery. What else you can do is you can put something there that consumes a lot of energy when it's available and pays you for doing that. So basically subsidizes the production of this intermittent resource. Bitcoin mining works in that situation. So we've set that up ourselves. For example, I do that in my place. We're fully off grid, 100% renewable. I get a lot of energy in the middle of the day. I mine Bitcoin, right?
Okay, so we could. What you're saying is yes, Bitcoin can use a lot of energy, but there's a smarter way.
It can support the rollout of clean energy. So in somewhere like Africa, where we have developed renewable energy projects, you don't have a good buyer often. Okay, you may have what's called a single buyer market, and you don't want to sell to that single buyer because it's a government and they won't ever pay you back.
I see what you mean. Okay, let's just take a break. So let's think about this another way, because we don't talk about this often, right? I mean, Bitcoin supporting the rollout of clean energy, it's not something that makes the headline. So what you're saying is, in some countries where we can produce a lot of energy, clean energy, we don't have enough of a buy-in for that excess energy that we're producing when solar is at its peak, for example. And you think Bitcoin and mining and crypto mining could be that buyer that we're missing there?
They always pay. So yeah, it can. And yes, the price fluctuates, and that needs to go into your economic calculations, and you need to be conservative in terms of what you think your payback would be based on if Bitcoin's at $1,000 or $50,000. But that's a decision as an investor and your risk tolerance. But yes, it basically it can help subsidize the rollout of clean, intermittent, renewable energy in countries that are not able to otherwise finance it.
But this is the decision of miners, is it? So who decides, my question is, who decides when and how? So you mentioned you could decide when to mine because you care about the climate, but I imagine some other miners do not care. So how do we get the system to care?
The market needs to decide that. So take an example in Houston over the last month. You've had record-breaking temperatures. It's one of the largest places in the world for Bitcoin mining. The grid became unstable. They were suffering from inertia, etc. The miners were paid because they've got demand response to switch off. So that freed up, I think it was around 2 gigawatts. That's around 10% of the total Australian NEM, the national electricity market, were paid to switch off. So they stopped mining because other people needed it for their air conditioning, etc. So you need market mechanisms. But the reason I like it in energy poor countries is that you struggle to finance these projects, like banks, etc. You'll have certain organizations which will help take some of that risk away. But you're putting in there someone who pays on time, every time, that can help subsidize the rollout of clean energy in those markets.
How about in westernized countries?
Yeah, I think Houston's a good example. It's a very fast, flexible demand response opportunity. Batteries are still relatively expensive as a store of energy, to store energy. So what it can help do is it can actually help improve the economics of those projects. So, for example, the one that we did, our payback on installing Bitcoin miners was around 3 years on top of battery plus solar. So it really helped to subsidize our solar installation and battery installation.
When you say our, you're talking about your personal project?
Yeah.
Or is that through Katalyst.Earth?
No, that's just
no. It's your own personal. Okay. Can you unpack that for us? How does that work?
Yeah, we have
access.
Yeah, we because we're fully off grid, we have too many solar panels and not enough batteries, essentially. Specifically because at some point we'll get an EV, and that provides another battery. But the Bitcoin mining it does what called shave the curve. So if you think you've just got this too much energy at this small bit here, and that's where we run the miners.
I feel like we need to dive into this. How does this work? So let me recap to understand I get this right. So you currently live in a house where you are not connected to the grid. You generate your own power through solar and you have batteries, and you actually have an excess of energy. Can you remind us where you live exactly?
Just outside Byron Bay, New South Wales.
Okay, so in New South Wales. Okay, very good. And when you have excess energy, you use this energy to mine Bitcoin, I guess, in a sustainable way, and you get paid. And you get paid for this. This is great. And how does that work? How much? What? Can you tell us a bit more about that revenue stream?
It's more an experiment on my behalf, because I do believe that this technology can help. But based on the economics that I've done, we'll pay back the miners within about 2.5 years.
Okay. And do you see a future where lots and lots of Australians do this? What's your vision for the future?
Not really. No, I think that like with anything, it's an industrial process essentially, and you'll have that relatively centralized. But where I think it's really interesting is pairing it, particularly where you get a lot of grid congestion. So transmission doesn't keep up with the development of solar, large scale solar developments. So if you've got a transmission issue, people are putting batteries there, they're pairing solar with batteries. You could sensibly put like a modular Bitcoin miner next to it, and that would make sense. But this was maybe one angle that Katalyst were going to go. We've gone a completely different direction, because we see a much bigger problem around how we value natural capital, and that's what we see in carbon markets and these environmental markets is where we kind of saw renewables 10 years ago.
Okay. Actually, this is a perfect segue. I think we need to explain a little further to the audience what Katalyst.Earth does and what's your... so if you could walk us through what the company does, but also where do you see the future and what do you want to achieve? Yeah.
We're still very early stage, so we're 6 months in. We developed this NFT project for a number of reasons. One, as I mentioned, prove the technology. Two, to actually raise some capital to put into regenerative projects. So we're regenerating the Big Scrub, which is a subtropical rainforest up here in New South Wales. We've only got around 1% of that left today because it was logged for lumber and then cattle for dairy. So there's a big movement in this area to try and bring back the Big Scrub, and we are putting funds raised towards that effort, which basically means planting trees, planting biodiverse native species, where we're up to about 72 different species at the moment we've planted. But the vision for Katalyst is really what we're trying to do is create a new environmental marketplace. And I want to bring this back actually, because we didn't really fully unpack it, difference between proof of work and proof of stake. Proof of stake is a different type of blockchain process. And we use that because it's far more energy efficient. We don't use a proof of work one. You may have heard of Ethereum. They're moving to proof of stake this year, which basically I hope will make the conversation around energy consumption redundant, because that being the second largest blockchain after Bitcoin will now consume far less, like less than a Visa transaction per transaction on blockchain. So, when you go to buy a coffee, consumes X amount of energy just to get the beans there and then grind them and then blah, blah, blah. You're tapping your card, that Visa transaction, one transaction on Ethereum will be less than that. Whereas at the moment it's much more. So, so what are we building? A new regenerative environmental marketplace. And what does that mean? Well, basically it means creating that measurement, reporting, verification tool for project developers so that they can actually record what they're doing using drones and LiDAR technology to prove that those projects are still in place. And then delivering that to what are today essentially philanthropic sponsorship organizations that are paying to plant trees because it aligns with their purpose and values. They're not getting that level of information today. So where we end up is kind of between this very gold-plated carbon market with their methodologies that are very complicated, difficult to understand, and we think are a big bottleneck to scaling this market, and a zero verification market where people donate money, some trees get planted, and everyone forgets about it because they just get to say they planted some trees. How do we create something that's kind of a bit in the middle where we can scale this market 100?
So you wouldn't go through the traditional AQ certification?
No.
And
did you say NQ?
No, AQs. So Australian
actually, no, we're
AQ.
not focused on AQs, no.
Yes, which is the traditional Australian accreditation for carbon credits, just for people's reference. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So decentralizing essentially regeneration projects. And don't you think, where will be the, I guess, governance control? Can it, because, the government accreditation is a mechanism to ensure about the quality of the projects. Don't you fear that your system could have some, some, I don't know, just governance issues or?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's something that we're very focused on. So Australia's kind of unique with their ACCU system. And I think even that's had a lot of problems because it's at the whim of politicians. So, the outgoing energy minister, Angus Taylor, at the stroke of a pen, basically disrupted that market completely overnight. And the value of those ACCUs plummeted, by almost 50%. So I think we've seen with the lack of global coordination towards net zero and how little traction has been gained in that space, that it's very difficult for governments to actually play the role we need them to play as citizens, as global citizens in that space. We have a voluntary carbon market. It's worth about $1 billion today. We need that worth, 50, 100 times more by 2030. And that voluntary market today has a number of gatekeepers. And then on the other end, you've got all these great organizations that are out there planting trees, getting donations from corporates to go and show their end customers what's being done. No one's out there checking on them, that they're actually being planted. They're not being sold 10 times. So we see a way to help improve that market, okay, bring it a little bit out of the shadows, but also to get more end customer engagement.
So scalability and transparency.
100%, yeah. So how can you get an end customer, someone that goes in and buys a litre of milk at Woolworths or something, how can you put it into our economic system that each time they do that, they're helping to create a regenerative future? How can we embed this in our economics? And I think we set out as Katalyst to fix one small problem in the existing carbon markets. And the more we dove into it, the more we found how difficult it was to scale, the more gatekeepers, intermediaries, etc. we found. The more we're determined to try and create something new that everyone can not just participate in, but really be incentivized to participate in.
Yes, because without an incentives, we can doubt that this is going to take off, isn't it?
Correct. I mean, philanthropy has been stuck at around 2.5% of GDP since the 1950s. It's not enough.
We need to, yeah, the IPCC said this year, we need to increase 7-fold the investment we make in climate solutions as a whole. So I agree with you, need to scale, and we need to do it fast, which is why sustainable finance is so fascinating, isn't it? Because it has this power.
Absolutely. And I love like what Bloom are doing and really reaching out to retail customers and helping them direct their investments into, philanthropy will only get us so far. You need to provide an avenue like Bloom does for people to invest in sustainable companies that are, profit driven, but also purpose driven. Ones that have, a real opportunity to help us create the future that, I want my children to live in.
Absolutely. That's music to my ears. One last question, and then we'll go to the audience. I'm sure they have a few questions. So not financial advice, but what is your tip for the audience in terms of getting involved with crypto and blockchain in a sustainable way? Because I think people like myself have been really, blocked by the idea that blockchain is not good for the environment, and we've been perhaps avoiding this type of investments. So what's your advice? What's your guidance?
Yeah, well, we are not an investment vehicle. We have a piece of art which is a collectible, not a financial product. Okay, and that helps drive funds into regenerating big scrub. So of course I have to sort of give myself a plug there, and Web3 terminology shill our project. But the real way I think is there's been this growth in what are called DAOs, distributed autonomous organizations, and these are like an anti-corporate corporation, and they are exploding. Like there is a DAO for every passion project you could imagine. I would suggest getting involved in something like that as well. It doesn't cost you anything. You can contribute, you can learn, you can educate others.
How does that work? How do you join?
Yeah, so I mean, people, if you've got like an area that you're really interested in, I'm sure I can find a DAO for you. So just reach out to me. But it's research. Yeah, I think like we've tried to build a community with Katalyst. A lot of it sits on what's called Discord, which is just a chat.
Okay, so that's a good first step. So people can join your Discord to learn more about, the intersection between decentralized finance and climate impact, and getting involved. And people can start collecting NFTs that are attached to regenerating an area in the surroundings of Byron Bay. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the Northern Rivers region is a really unique ecosystem here, because we've got basically it's an old volcano, and the big scrub extends about 100 kilometers north of us and 100 kilometers south, based around Wollongong, which is Mount Warning. And it's a beautiful region. One of the reasons that this area is quite unique is because of that ecosystem.
And how does that work in terms of platform? Like, do we need to create an account somewhere? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, we've made it really easy, actually. So one of the things that, because we're at this intersection of, let's call it crypto and climate, which is being termed ReFi, regenerative finance. We are we're having to bring what we call Web 2 into Web 3. I don't know if those terms, we're going to have to unpack those today. But
for the noobs, let's just explain simply for the newbies here, and myself included, how do you even buy an NFT, and how does that work?
It's so complicated. The user experience, the UX for someone today is horrible. It's horrific, right? So what we've done is made it really easy. You can do it with us just by a normal Shopify account, right?
Okay, so it's like purchasing an item online.
Correct. And then we will take you through, if you want to set up wallets, etc., that you can save this NFT in, happy to do that with people as well. But we've got a pre-sale on where people will get a digital or a glass frame printed with their NFT. So we're trying to make it, and we haven't seen this done before, we're trying to make, again, we're innovating, we're trying to make it more accessible for for people that just can't be bothered
and a bit more
going
tangible.
fully down the rabbit hole.
I see. Thank you so much. I've learned a ton, and I think in just an hour, you've helped me see in practical terms how we could leverage blockchain technologies for climate impact, which is really exciting. I'm just going to ask the audience, if you have questions, please type them in the chat. Mitchell is an expert, as you've seen during this event, so please take advantage of his presence and his knowledge. There's no questions so far, so I might just keep going with mine. My next question is, what's your prediction on the next 1 to 2 years for NFTs and blockchain in general? Do you think it's going to completely go mainstream? Where do you think this is all going?
Yeah. Where I hope to is we get to a point where people stop talking about NFTs, because at the end of the day, it's just a technology, and every one of you will interact with it at some point in your lifetime. So a passport is a really great example of why an NFT, utility NFTs could fill. It's unique. It's unique to you. So I think that's a great potential use case. I think you'll start seeing it more and more over the next couple of years, and then I think it'll disappear and everyone will forget about NFTs, but they'll be interacting with them.
I would love a digital passport that I cannot even lose, and it's somewhere. Wouldn't that be great?
That's the next step. So there's after NFTs, there's a thing called soul-bound tokens, and that means it's yours for life. You can't transfer it.
So literally linked to your soul. Wow, this is it's another level. We have a question, I think, that just came through from Maddie. So where could we find the Discord for Katalyst.Earth? Is there a link? Can we paste that in the chat somewhere?
Yeah, I can do that right now. Actually, I shut down my Discord just before we came on here, but let me help you with that.
Discord is all the rage at the moment.
It was, and then it's funny because I think we've seen with Europe, with summer, with the US, people are back in the real world now, post-COVID, etc. They're now more, I've sent that as a direct message to you. Sorry, Camille, I'll send that to everyone. They're now back outside, back in IRL, in real life. I think one other thing, if it's okay, just to give a plug, is we're actually hosting a festival, a Regen Festival up here in Byron in November. So we're hosting that at Byron Theatre and at the Farm, which is
exciting.
Quite a well-known.
Is there a link to an event that we can register to?
Website will be up shortly. Can share that with you. But the idea is to get experts across the different space. So everything from carbon market project developers, climate tech companies that are helping to accelerate this, and that's around that MRV space. To do that. Also, we host a weekly networking drinks on Wednesdays at North Byron Hotel. For anyone at the intersection of climate, entrepreneurialism, technology, come on down. We've got guys from
that sounds great. Go for a surf and then talk sustainable finance. What a great combo. That's all we have time for. So I might wrap up the event. I don't think there's another question, but if there's anything else, you can email me or email Mitchell. I will send all the details via email tomorrow. I would like to thank everyone for joining today. I'm also going to say that if you haven't already, join us at Bloom. We make climate finance accessible, and the fund is really growing. I'm super happy to share with you all that we have tipped over $1 million invested on the platform. So it's really beautiful because we can start investing in really impactful projects in Australia. We are now looking at wind farms and solar farms in Queensland and New South Wales. We are looking at a fund that will support clean water. So this is all thanks to this great community. And I know we can go further and we can go faster. 1 million is great, but we need so much more. There is such an emergency to act for the climate. So if you haven't already, join Bloom, invest with us, have a look at our website. And if you have already, then talk about it with your friend. I think with our discussion today, Mitchell, we can agree that finance is an amazing tool for individuals to scale their impact. I think for too long, we've told people that they were guilty of their carbon footprint and we haven't given them proper solutions to scale their impact. This is it, guys. Using your money power for good makes a huge impact. And you can change the system, which is where we really need to think, I think, these days, not so much our individual impact, but how can we change the system with our own individual actions? And finance is all about changing the system, sustainable finance anyway. So thank you so much, Mitchell. It's been such a wonderful chat. I've learned a ton, and really, I mean it. And I think our audience will agree. I hope everyone will be able to join the Discord. The link is on the chat. Get in touch with Mitchell, support entrepreneurs like us who are trying to make the right thing and create the future. So make sure you connect with Mitchell on LinkedIn and support his company. Join the event in November. I will certainly have a look at the page when it's available, and would love to come down to Byron Bay for a little sustainable chat with you guys. And I think that's it. Anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up?
No, thank you so much for having me. I really look forward to continuing this, and I think that what you've built is great at Bloom as well, Camille. I might just share our Twitter account. Is that okay with you as well? Of course. Yeah. Just in case anyone wants to follow. So
I will join this as well. And this event the recording will be shared with all the attendees and people who've registered to the event. So more people will see this. Thank you so much, Mitchell, and have a great day. See you later.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.